Last night we had Councillor John Leach on the show, the Liberal Democrat. Well, he's back on the show tonight at around about 10:30, and he's going to be speaking at the same time as Councillor John Flanagan. He's from the Labour Party. He's also the exec member of finance at the council. You may have seen today that what we were talking about last night has now gone through in a kind of a shoehorned way. We were talking about pay rises for Fat Cat council officials last night, weren't we? And in effect, that has happened. However, the official line is that certain roles have been rejigged, and therefore more responsibility had been put on certain people, therefore they needed to be paid accordingly. Believe that if you will. Anyway, both councillors, will be on the show at around about 10:30. My next two guests might stimulate a little bit of conversation as well. Please let me introduce you to Councillor John Flanagan. Joining me on the show, he's the exec member of finance and human resources at the council. How are you tonight, Councillor John? Are you well?
Fine, Adam. Nice to speak to you.
And you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. Also joining us on the line, a gentleman that was with me last night, Councillor John Leach. Welcome back to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent stuff. Both men on the line. The reason for that is when we were speaking to John Leach last night, we were obviously talking about these pay rises at Manchester Council. Today that has happened, that's gone through. Some serious statistics to get through over the next 10 to 15 minutes. If you've got a thought on that, you're more than welcome to come and join us. 01612880103. I'm just going to start with you, Councillor John Leach, if that's all right with you. Can you just, in your own words, explain to my listeners what has happened this morning when the pay rises went through?
Well, as I said last night, the planned pay rises range from around 5% up to a whopping 60%, depending on which post we're talking about. And this is at a time when the council says it hasn't got enough money to maintain certain services, and other members of council staff have just got a 1% pay rise, and I don't think residents or staff will think it's acceptable that senior members of staff are getting such large rises when the council says it has no money. Councillor John Flanagan, your response to that, sir?
John's been a bit liberal with the truth. He's put these points again to the committee this morning. Just starting with this 60% pay rise is incorrect. This is a redeployment of an individual that's been carrying out this work, and it was mentioned to John this morning by the city solicitor. This guy has been carrying out this work for 2 years while his colleague had a serious illness, and he's now taken on the role full-time. It's actually two posts. He's actually looking after the safety of children, not only in Manchester, but Salford. So it's a major post. It's two posts in one. Just like to take the point that John's made about budgets. He's quite right to raise that. This won't cost any more. This is from original budgets in the council. This is Directorate's own budgets. He's also made a point about this 1% increase, and he's quite right. Across the board, all staff got 1%. But Manchester Labour Council believes in a living wage. That isn't the con that the government do of £7.20 an hour. We do, which is the national proper living wage of £8.25. So last November, we raised the lowest paid workers in our town hall from £7.85 to £8.25. Not massive amounts of money, I agree. But this process isn't just about cherry-picking the top of the tree and rewarding those that are at the top. This is a process which was explained to John of right the way through the town hall to recompense and to value our staff who are working hard, who suffered under these government cuts just as much as the residents and everyone else. But we've imposed £320 million worth of cuts. John was a member of that government until recently. But more to the point, we've lost 4,000 staff and 400 managers. These staff that are being re-evaluated for their salaries have actually stepped into the gaps to do more work. And what we found out last November, or I did, was that there was a gender imbalance, and this is something that we're trying to put right now. Again, this was mentioned to John, and it is in the report.
Just on that, Councillor John Flanagan, just from a general public's point of view, you can understand Councillor John Leach's point regarding people might look at this a little bit cynically when people that, like you've just said, have been doing certain roles, have been paying X amount, and then what happens is there's an increase in pay for that particular person, but the way that has been shoehorned and sold back to the public is that the position has been, let's say, effectively made redundant, and a new position's been created. There's a cynicism about that from me when I look at that.
But that isn't the case. The position that John, the one, the headline he keeps using is 60%. There's no shoehorning, there's no redundant. The individual had long-term sickness for 2 years. Her deputy has been carrying out the role on a much lower wage. He's now stepping into the gap of this. This individual's left the organisation through ill health, and what has happened is we have put more responsibilities. He's now looking after the full of Manchester Council's legal responsibility for children and Salford. Now we've took on that extra workload, so I give the point to yourself. If I ask you to do another radio show tonight.
Yeah.
Would you expect to be paid extra for doing that? You've got your job. This is an extra job, and that's the point. John's quite right to raise the question, and the public are quite right to question us what we're doing. This is about transparency, where people can see these salaries, where this is public money. There's no doubt about that, and they're quite right to be concerned and ask the question. But the fundamental of that, is this fair and is this honest that we pay what is the going rate for the individuals working for us from the top to the bottom? And John, again, we've said this a number of times, this isn't just starting at the top, this is going right through the organisation, right through our lowest pay. And one of the other things that the City Council is doing, it isn't just about saying, we'll give a living wage of £8.25. We're actively working about giving skills to these people that are on £8.25 so they can get out of that poverty trap. Because we don't want to just keep giving them the lowest pay. We want to say, we're going to reskill you. That's a big challenge for the City Council with the cuts. But I'm determined, and the Council is determined, to ensure that our lowest pay staff are given the opportunity to get out of this trap of low pay.
Councillor John Leach, your response?
Well, John asked the question, is it fair? I would ask the question, is it fair that the Deputy Chief Executive for Growth and Neighbourhoods is getting a pay rise in excess of, almost £14,000, which is almost as much as as a grade 1 member of staff gets as a basic wage? Is it fair that member of staff is getting a £14,000 pay rise when the vast majority of staff at the council have had a 1% pay rise? I don't think that's fair. I don't think residents will think that's fair, and I don't think other staff members who've only had a 1% rise will think it's fair. I also think that the staff members who are actually doing more now are the frontline staff, those people who've been asked to take on additional responsibilities because the council has lost a number of staff over the last few years. No one is denying that, and the people who've actually ended up having to step up to the mark the most are the least well-off paid members of staff of Manchester City Council, and it seems to be the highest paid members of staff who are getting the biggest increases in salary. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think anyone else in Manchester will think it's fair.
Councillor John Leach, can I just post this to you, sir, just regarding what Councillor John Flanagan said earlier on about the gender pay gap and equality. We're all for that, aren't we? Obviously, we expect people to be paid rightly what they are for the work that they are doing. It's out of the 10 major officials, 7 of them are ladies, so therefore we are bridging that gap with this particular situation.
It's absolutely correct that we should not have a gender pay gap at all at Manchester City Council. The reality is that these two reports are not really about the gender pay inequality. These reports are about increasing the salaries of senior members of staff, and it was only after people raised concerns about the level of increases of these salaries that Labour councillors on the committee started talking as though it was all about gender equality, gender pay equality. It's not about gender pay equality. It's about raising the salaries of senior members of staff at the same time as telling other members of staff that they can only have a 1% pay rise. And that's simply not fair, whether they're female members of staff or male members of staff.
Councillor John Flanagan.
Adam, again, John's put a bit of a nice spin on this. It is totally about gender equality. He mentioned the Deputy Chief Executive who looks after neighbourhood. She's a female.
Mm-hmm.
She's on 14 grand less than a male counterpart, a Deputy Chief Exec. How can you justify that? When I found out about that, I'm embarrassed by that. I was a Labour councillor. We've all had our eyes off the ball. The opposition has, the Labour councillors have, the trade unions and our staff. That is untenable. It's not moral, it's not legally right, and it's not politically right that any woman should get less and she's got the same title. The city solicitor, a woman, again underpaid. The woman
when you say, Councillor John, when you say underpaid, when you say underpaid compared to a male counterpart, is what you're saying. Is the male counterpart overpaid? Is the male man overpaid? Because we're talking about £75,000 here.
Do you know what, Adam? You're quite right. What we have to do on this, and that's the question you got asked. Is the male counterpart overpaid? So what we have to do is that external benchmark with other cities, not like you could look at Birmingham, but it's twice the size. So you go to a place like Nottingham to benchmark. So benchmarking is important. So that was the first thing. Mm-hmm. Was the male counterpart properly paid and benchmarked against other cities? Yes, that's what we found. So her wages had to rise in line with that.
Yeah.
Let me just take the head of adult social care. Her male counterpart has just started a job. We benchmarked that when he came into the organisation, and we found out she was underpaid. Now, why has this happened? Because most of the women who were in our organisation, and again, I'm very proud of the fact that the vast majority of our senior members of staff or women have worked their way through and up the organisation without having proper benchmarking or recognition of the work they've done. So, yes, it is about gender inequalities, is part of it, but I'll take exception to what John has said, that we're not looking after all our staff. This is a review of all our staff, and he's quite right to point out those on the front line, those cleaning the streets, fixing the potholes, are the ones that have had to step up to the mark. But it's a bit rich from the man that's propped up a Tory government and was an MP and had the power not to cut Manchester so deeply. So for him to turn around and start lecturing people in Manchester and saying, well, it's really hard this now, the cuts are really hard. He was part of a government that imposed more cuts on Manchester than the leafy suburbs and likes of Surrey. And he'll justify that as that it wasn't him and he voted against. He props up a Tory government.
Gentlemen, can you both hang on there? I've got to go to break, but I'd love you to both continue. Hopefully you'll be okay to do that. Is that all right with you, Councillor John Flanagan?
Fine, thanks.
John Leach, is that okay with you?
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent, because I would like you to come back to obviously what Councillor Flanagan has just said. They give you the opportunity to respond. Right now, Councillor John Leach from the Liberal Democrats and Councillor John Flanagan from Labour, both talking about the pay rises for council officials that went through earlier on today. Just to you, Councillor John Leach, just before we went to break there, obviously Councillor Flanagan did say that it's a bit rich for you to take the moral high ground where you are at this moment in time. Your response to that?
Well, I think you know that John's on a sticky wicket when he seems to be blaming these pay rises on the government and the fact that the government has cut the budget to local authorities. The fact remains is that the council claims time and time again that it can't afford to give most staff a pay rise of more than 1%, and it tells residents that that we can no longer provide certain core services because of budget cuts. Yet it can still find money for pay rises. If I just give you two other examples, the head of the executive office has just received a pay rise from £60,000 to £67,000. That's a £7,000 pay rise. This job was only established, I understand, back in November. We were told at the committee meeting this morning that this role began back last November, and a £7,000 pay rise just in the space of 6 months. Now, I don't see how that can be blamed on government cuts or me being part of the previous coalition government. The head spin doctor for the council, a rise of £10,000. I don't see how that can be justified. Now, when I raised this at the committee this morning, John just accused me of being insulting for using the term spin doctor. I don't think it's an insulting term at all. It's what the chief communications officer for the council does. It's there to spin the line for the council, and yet that job is now getting £10,000 more than it was before. I don't think you can justify these rises in any terms at a time when the council has had to cut its budget and has had to get rid of staff and reduce the number of services available to local people.
Councillor Flanagan, just to come to that and to add to it as well, I've just had a few messages in from various people that are listening to us right now. Petra in Stockport says, how can someone vote for their own pay rise? It's a ridiculous scenario and it's open to nothing but corruption. Your thoughts on that?
Well, no one did vote for their own pay rise is the first thing, because it was externally benchmarked. We're not getting a pay rise. This is for our staff. Can I just take up a few points that John's raised?
Yeah.
I raised the issue about him being a member of government, because one of the facts that people need to be aware of, and this has caused us great difficulty, and the context is how many staff we've lost. That means that, as John has quite rightly admitted, our frontline staff have to do more work, so do our senior members of staff. But a real fact that he was a member of a government where millionaires who lived in Surrey only contributed £15.91 over the last 6 years to these cuts, while Manchester residents over the same period contributed £770.62. He talks about fairness. The millionaires, £15. Terrace, your people I represent in Newton Heath, in terrace properties, £770. And then they wonder why we struggle with services. But does that mean that we don't pay the right amount of money? The 1% he goes on about is a national pay claim that every authority agreed to. That's what we agreed to. We want to raise the bar for all our staff, and that's why we give a living wage, a national living wage, not part of his government. I take the point that it came in after he left at Osborne, but Osborne gives £7.20. We give £8.20 because we value people. We know what poverty is because we deal with it every day of the week. You mentioned the spin doctor. The spin doctor doesn't spin anything to the council. Their whole job is to communicate with the public. And it's for the public to challenge decisions we as councillors make. So what we're doing is investing in an individual that is using social media, using every means at their hands to actually communicate with residents so they can challenge us on this. And I don't understand, as a Liberal Democrat, that he thinks that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And I'll give an example. This time we're setting a 3-year budget. We're going to the public first. We're not sat down deciding what the budgets are going to be. We're actually going out to the public because we want to know what they feel. We represent them, and it's their money we're spending. So it's right that we should have someone who's paid to go out and champion them and communicate with them and to inform us what they think.
Councillor Leach, just on that, just want to add as well a bit of correspondence that's coming into the show. Justin in Fallowfield, in a roundabout way, saying if we want the best people to run the city, you've got to pay the best wages. Would you agree with that?
Well, I would just point out some of the existing salaries, which I don't think we really have a problem with filling these posts. City Solicitor's current salary is £113,000, going up to £125,000. The Deputy Chief Executive for Growth and Neighbourhoods, £111,000, going up to £125,000. The Strategic Director of Education and Skills, £116,000, going up to £125,000. We have real problems holding on to great social workers because they're not paid very big wages. I don't think we have a problem employing people on salaries of £113,000 or £111,000. We do have a problem with keeping staff who are earning, in some cases, as little as £14,000, £15,000 for a Grade 1 post, up to £23,000 at the top of Grade 5. Those are the sorts of people that we struggle to hold on to because we're not giving them great wages. But to claim that we have to give 20% pay rises to spin doctors or 10% pay rises to senior management team people who are already on over £100,000 a year, I find is fanciful.
Councillor Flanagan, I've got a gentleman on the phone, Stephen from Altrincham. He should be with me just shortly. Stephen, are you there?
I'm here, yeah, hi.
Stephen, I believe you've got a question for Councillor John Flanagan. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm not exactly very happy because it seems to me that Mr. Flanagan is being like politicians do, avoiding direct question. I mean, John Leach actually spoke for quite a while, putting some very valid points to him, but it seems that he's not directly addressing the points that Mr. Flanagan's put to him, like going on about...
He can hear you. You can address him directly if you wish.
Okay.
He's on the line.
Sorry.
Go for it. Go.
Hi, Stephen. Yeah.
Hi, you're right. Hello. With all due respect, politicians can be very good at avoiding direct answers, and so can, it seems, councillors, with all due respect. I think Mr. Leach has put some very valid points to you about councils, about the sort of money that's paid to the higher staff or the executives, regards to people being laid off, and also cutbacks to council services, which we've all been enduring for quite a long time.
Well, all due respect, Stephen, you live in Altrincham?
I do, but I'm not exactly very happy with Trafford.
In Trafford, well, Trafford Council is a Tory council and didn't suffer the cuts to Manchester. But I'll directly answer one of John Leach's questions. He mentioned about a city solicitor. I think most people are fair. If a city solicitor is on 10,000 less now at the moment than we're proposing, and we said to her, right, not only are you looking after Manchester's legal services, but you're now taking on the legal services Salford Council. This is part of the devolution deal. Would you say that is taking on more responsibilities and deserves more money for that?
Stephen, I think that's to you. Are you there, sir?
Yeah, it overlapped a bit there with the delay. So what was the question? What the point you put to me about solicitors being paid for two areas?
The point is that we're increasing the city solicitor Manchester's wages by £10,000 to recognise the fact that she now not only runs Manchester's legal services, but all of Salford's legal services, because under the devolution deal, and part of the Tory government's idea is that councils should work in conjunction. So our legal services run, with the staff of Salford. They actually manage the Salford City Solicitor's Office. So we recompense our City Solicitor by £10,000 more. Would you say that was fair?
I understand. Yeah, if you're covering two different boroughs or two different jobs, then they should be paid more. As to how much, whether it's proportionate, is another question. That's not, I don't think for either of us to try to decide upon. Because I think was...
Yeah, sorry for cutting across your statement. If you work out that City Solicitor's on £100,000 for Manchester, it would be fair to say that for running Salford, it would be parable. It'd be 90,000 to 100,000. Yeah. We're giving them £10,000 to run it. So I think that's value for money for all the public persons.
That sounds reasonable.
Well, another person John had a go about was the head of regeneration for the city centre of Manchester. Is currently on 62,000. We're proposing to increase that to 75,000. Now, most people who travel into Manchester will think, my God, look at the regeneration, look at the tower cranes, look at the building. This officer is responsible for engaging with developers, engaging with businesses, engaging with transport. I think 75,000 is pretty damn cheap for that job, to be honest. And I'm a builder. I think for 75,000, you look at it, the growth of Manchester is the second city in the country. The population is proposed to grow over 200,000 over the next 10 to 15 years. The city is booming, despite the recession that other places have gone through. And John, complains about us not recognising that woman officer who's doing so much work for the city. Again, I put the question to Stephen. Would you think that was fair?
Stephen?
Well, yeah, okay. Well, if you're comparing it to, if you're comparing that salary to what we paid in the private sector in commerce, which I don't know how much we pay, but if it seemed a reasonable amount, I mean, I guess somebody working for the council possibly gets a bit less than they would do, say, if they work in private industry, because generally the impression I get private industry has more money available or pays higher salaries. But are you comparing like for like with what they would get if they were working in private commerce?
Yeah, I think, Stephen, I agree with you. I've always worked in the private sector. I've never been in the public sector. It's always been the case in the public sector that public sector workers had continuity of work, it was security, and had a good pension. And, you know, the likes of us who had to, you know, I've been a builder all my life, you know, you just get stuck in and you work and you think, oh, they've got a cushion on the council officers. Well, I've been a councillor 16 years. It's not true. And one thing of this, the cuts that we've been having, this, you know, the fact that some of these people have joined from being very young, thinking they've got a career, some of them have been, you know, we've never had compulsory redundancies, but I know some places that have had to. So that security of work's gone, and the wages don't reflect now the amount of work they're doing. And what we're trying to do is balance that. They will never be at the level of the private sector. We accept that. But I think it's right that we should pay those that do work for us the right level. And that doesn't mean just the top. It means everyone. And I think that's the challenge for Manchester City Council. But we're up for the challenge. We've got cuts. I have to deal with those cuts. And yes, I'll complain about them, but I get on and deal with it. And this, you know, I can do, you know, and I get the point what you're saying. Politicians will dodge it. That's part of, you know, what we do. We try to avoid and try and twist things. But the reality is we have to deal with the cuts that we're given, whether you're in Trafford, Stockport or Manchester, and we have to get on with it and make the best of it. And that's what Manchester's doing. We're investing $1.3 billion in Manchester on our capital programmes because we're going to invest in the people of Manchester.
Councillor Flanagan, just hold there. I've just got to go to the news. I'm going to, if it's okay with you, we'll come straight back after the news. If you've only just joined us, I'm very pleased that we've got Councillor John Flanagan and Councillor John Leach both on the phone, discussing, obviously, the pay rises for council officials that's happened earlier on today. Councillor Leach, I apologise to both men for holding you after 11 o'clock. It's just I was conscious there that Councillor Leach didn't get much of a say in the last 5 to 10 minutes. I just want to pose to you, Councillor Leach, what Councillor Flanagan was saying there regarding the regeneration. And it kind of rung true to me. At the end of the day, Manchester is a great city. It's a booming city. We've got plenty of regeneration, and the person responsible for that, as you mentioned, is on now a salary of £75,000. And to be fair, Councillor Flanagan does make a great argument there that that's a bit of a snip.
Well, that particular employee's just received a 20% pay rise. And I would argue very strongly that Councillor Flanagan's got his priorities wrong, because if the council has plenty of money to spend on improving staff salaries, we would be far better off starting off by improving the salaries of the least well-off workers at Manchester City Council rather than the best well-off workers. In the committee meeting this morning, the Deputy Chief Executive described these increases as relatively modest. Now, I would think that the vast majority of residents of Manchester would say that these increases are not relatively modest. They're big increases in salary. As a percentage, some of them aren't massive, but when people are getting over £10,000 pay rise, when some members of our staff at Manchester City Council get less than £15,000 a year in total, I think £10,000 is an excessive rise at a time when the council doesn't have a great deal of money. And I think clearly Councillor Flanagan has his priorities wrong if he thinks the priority is to increase the salaries of our best paid staff rather than our least well-off staff. And for me, I don't think that's the sort of attitude that we should see from a Labour council.
Are your priorities in the wrong place, Councillor Flanagan?
Well, one thing me and John agree with, this is a modest increase. I wouldn't say that's a modest increase. I mean, these salaries are way above mine, 3 and 4 times above my salary. So, no, I agree with him on that point. But, again, the opening argument I had, we didn't start with the highest. John wasn't a councillor at the time. It was last November, and I'll take the point. He's unaware of this. But we increased our lowest pay first. And the review will cover all of it. It's about fairness. And I go back to, is it fair that we should benchmark the person that's responsible for the regeneration of Manchester? Now, my priority is to increase the amount of people working in the city, both for the council and through businesses. We're doing that by social value on every contract. We spend $400 million a year on businesses. I want those to be Manchester businesses first and Greater Manchester businesses. So that increases the amount of people working and providing for services for Manchester. We're given a commitment of spending $1.3 billion over the next 3 or 4 years by investing funds, by borrowing money, by big contracts where, John Leach goes on about potholes in the road. We're trying to embark on a programme of repairing potholes by investing capital funds. Now, I haven't got my priorities wrong. My priorities are about upskilling people, increasing the amount of people that work in Manchester, and getting people out of poverty. I'm committed to protecting the most vulnerable, the elderly, and the young from the worst cuts that his government imposed on Manchester. I don't think they're their own priorities. Now, if he's telling me that I shouldn't set a fair wage that is equitable, he thinks that I shouldn't be transparent, because I've published all these figures have been published for these wages because it is public money.
Mm-hmm.
The residents of Manchester are paying these wages, and they need to hold us to account why we agree it, but they also need to hold the staff to account that they're actually delivering. Now, again, challenge people, go into Manchester city centre and see the regeneration. I need as my priority to ensure that every ward in Manchester feels the benefit of that regeneration. And that includes my own ward, Newton Heath. I want people in Newton Heath to be working on these schemes and working for Manchester.
Councillor Flanagan, brilliant points. Thank you very much for your time. Councillor Leach, brilliant points. Thank you both for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'll be speaking to you both again soon at a later date. You're listening to Key 103. Your thoughts on that are most welcome.